your Montessori days at home while looking online or reading through books, everything seems so peaceful and smooth. You know the Montessori approach is something you want to adopt, but the reality is at home, life is a little chaotic and
That's right.
can sometimes feel unstructured. And in our experience, you're probably either leaning a little too structured with your kids or not quite structured enough. So today we are going to dig into how to structure your Montessori homeschool days without the overwhelm. We're going to break down the parts of your day that you need to take a look at.
That's right. The truth of the matter is you don't need a strict schedule.
Right.
And that's, I think, a surprise to a lot of people. They think that without a strict schedule, they'll never get through all the material or they're just not doing their job. That's to deny the power within the child.
Yes.
Right? In the Montessori approach, what we recognize is that the child has this incredible ability to teach and learn already within. And our job as the facilitator, as the parent, as the teacher, is to get out of the way of that to some degree, to support that as much as possible, but in a way that's very different. So the best routine for you probably does not look like a strict, let's get up at 9 o'clock in the morning and do math.
It probably doesn't. And I know that right now, there are some of you out there right now thinking, but I need that structured schedule to feel sane. Otherwise, like, how will I know what I'm doing? So we're not saying not to plan, but we are saying be cautious when you go online and you see very detailed schedules. I know there is at least one Montessori curriculum out there sold to parents that walks you through a work cycle schedule of what to teach on what day, like exactly what lessons to give throughout the whole year, month to month, week. It's like a very week to week to week schedule of everything in the Montessori curriculum. And that is actually not the best way that children learn because it's too rigid and we can't both be following a very, very strict daily schedule or weekly schedule and also be following our child.
Yeah, I mean, it's very comforting to us as the adult, as the parent, to have that kind of rigid structure. We hear that actually a lot when people come to us and want to kind of get a sense of what it's like to use the Child of the Redwoods curriculum or approach, our system.
Yes.
And we have to explain, like, there is, of course, a structure, but the structure is based on your child's absorbent mind. And the material that we've created and the approach to Montessori that we've created is really built around that. So you do want a predictable rhythm,
Yes.
right? It creates safety, it creates a foundation for concentration. You want a firm rhythm, but what you don't want is that rigid calendar and clock-based structure that is so commonly had. And I know this may sound radical, and some of you are going to be, kind of on edge when we're saying this, like, wait a minute, then how do I know I'm doing the right thing? That's the power of the Montessori method. And it really does go to that absorbent mind. Now, I want to underscore, just because we're saying don't pay so close attention to the clock and to the calendar as to feel like it's 9 o'clock, we do this, it's 10 o'clock, we do that. That's true. You don't want to have that obedience, but necessarily.
I mean, obviously, sometimes you have appointments.
Of course.
Maybe you're expected to go to park day at 10 o'clock in the morning to meet with friends or,
That's right.
We're not saying that you're not to hold yourself to those kind of...
Of course. But we're also not saying, though, that you shouldn't have a routine.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have a rhythm and routine, that there actually aren't benefits, in fact, really, really important benefits to following a flow. So we want you instead to not say, I don't want the calendar or the clock, or I'm going to live by the calendar or the clock. I want you instead to...
We're completely unschool. Like
else,
right?
You're going to take off the hat that says, this is the way it has to be done, and I want you to put on your Montessori rhythm hat. I don't have a hat with me right now. Your figurative hat, we're going to put it on right now. And when you put that hat on, here are 5 things that we want to share that explains how a Montessori rhythm, when you got that Montessori rhythm hat on, what it would look like.
Okay, first I want to say my hat has purple feathers all over it and lots of flowers.
That is a fun hat. Now, what would my hat?
I think yours might be a Giants hat.
Could be a Giants hat. Now, I see we've got a good crowd today. I'd like to know, in the audience, what would your Montessori routine hat look like?
Oh, yeah.
That's
yeah.
right. Your
Well,
Montessori rhythm and routine
Tell
hat.
us if you ever had this experience where you felt like you felt so disoriented and unstructured that you were just like hunting for the perfect structure to follow.
That's right.
Because that's often been me, and I've often gone online, and when I look at sometimes what other homeschoolers' schedules are, then I start to like hyperventilate because it's like 8 o'clock we're doing this, 8:30 we're doing this. And some of those times I've even tried to follow a schedule like that, which makes sense for someone who leans a little more chaotic and disorganized.
That's right.
Anyway, I'm very susceptible to those kinds of temptations, right?
Yes.
And what I have found is that I can follow a schedule.
Of
but
course.
to the T. But it's very, very late. But I can't follow the kids and follow the schedule. It just can't be done.
That's right.
So you're leaning into flow. You're leaning into the balance between observing your child, setting up the environment, being patient, having your goals
Clear
in front of
expectations.
you. Clear expectations. I mean, all of that is good. And maybe you are the kind of person who needs to start homeschool at 9 o'clock. I mean, I was like 9 o'clock was when we
That's right.
started our homeschool day officially. And until then, it was like such a whatever happens morning, until that 9 o'clock. And that was my accountability cue. So obviously time can be part of it. But that kind of leads us into our very first point, which is that it's actually beneficial that you give yourself that grace period of a calm start to your day.
That's right.
If we as homeschoolers, and I know this by experience, if we have written on our schedule, tomorrow morning, like yesterday, I didn't get anything done. Tomorrow, I'm going to wake the kids up at 7 o'clock and we're going to start on our math at 7:30. And then we're going to, take a break and then we're going to do this. Like it almost always fails in our household when I am too uptight about that morning start time.
That's right.
And so what I have found by working with thousands of parents on, from all over the world is that most of us as homeschoolers, we don't have to follow the rigid school schedule, whereas if you were formerly a school parent where you had to adhere to a very early morning, kind of more strict, rushed, harried, everybody get out the door on time type of schedule. This is a time period where you can lean into a calmer, more relaxed start. And that's actually, for most people that I think we've talked to in the homeschool community, that is a better start to the day.
And what I like about this is that it really hits the sweet spot. So a calm start to the day doesn't mean
Nothing,
right? It doesn't mean like, I suppose it could mean you get up when the mood strikes, but we actually do, children and adults, thrive best when we have some structure and consistency, right? So having a calm start to the day could mean that you get started at around 8 o'clock every morning. Yeah. And I bet when your kids are little, you're going to get started a lot earlier
That's right.
than when they get older.
That's right.
So if you got littles, your day may start at 6:30.
Yeah.
But it's not saying that you don't want to have a beginning, like an actual beginning. It's that, what do you want that beginning to look like? So a calm start might look like some snuggle time. It might be starting with breakfast.
Might be breakfast together. Might be a read aloud.
It might be, sitting around the table and doing a song, a candle. I know some in our community will do prayer in the morning, some form of ritual or transitional time. Like now we're awake, now we're getting out to move into the world.
Yeah, some of our families go out and do it in their backyard or on the balcony. Right. Like they actually go outside, say hello to the sun, get some of that nature.
Get that vitamin D flowing.
Nature juice. And have like a morning that way.
Totally.
When we start our mornings calm as homeschoolers, we're training our children to embrace a less hurried way of life that hopefully they will carry on with them as adults. I think that most adults who have regular jobs working outside of the home are also really high strung from the first moment their alarm goes off and they wake up and they have to rush to work.
Yes.
Okay, and there are people who love and thrive on that kind of dopamine-induced adrenaline schedule. But I think that the common consensus in our culture is that we collectively are a little too stressed and strung out most of the time, that we don't give ourselves enough time to ease into our work. And what Maria Montessori found through her research of children, she researched this on adults, but I would say it's true for adults too, when she documented the work cycle of children in her classroom, just the way they interacted with the environment and the guides who were there, the people who were there, what she noticed was that the children needed a calm start to their day and they were naturally inclined to it. They fared better when, and a good Montessori school will also start their school this way too. Like in a Montessori school, starts are a little bit different. In a traditional school, you might see kids file into the classroom, sit down and get to work, or have some kind of morning busy work to do while the teacher is, prepping. But in a Montessori school, there's like a filtering that happens for that very first 30 minutes of the day at least. Children kind of wander into the classroom and things just kind of like start to
percolate or something.
Percolate. And what are the students doing? They're supposed to be and encouraged to be greeting each other, to like be kind of choosing something easy or purposeful. Usually a lot of practical life happens in that first 30 minutes at a Montessori school. So, I mean, this is the authentic Montessori method. It's not just for homeschoolers. It's really the Montessori way.
Yeah.
We start calm. We let things percolate. We allow the children to choose easy things. So some things you might want to integrate in your calm start could be practical life activities that you do together or that you model for your children. In a Montessori classroom, what would the guide be doing? Do you know?
I would think they would be preparing the classroom, maybe getting things set up.
Usually they are actually like modeling kind of household chore type of things. And so, yes, you're right. But also like they very obviously would be folding laundry in the middle of the floor, or maybe doing a little ironing or helping, encouraging the children to wash the snacks and put them into the snack area. I mean, the guides are modeling calming, practical activities.
That's so interesting.
During this time, and also greeting the kids as they walk in.
And I wonder if you think out there in the audience, how you start your day. Now I know it varies. If you've got a little baby, it's going to be different. But over the course of my life, as I think about, you always settle into some kind of a ritual that really is dictated by kind of whatever, for me, like whatever job I'm in. Like, so currently, because we work from our home, I wake up, I'll boil water for coffee, and while that's doing, I'll unload the dishwasher, I'll wipe down the counters, I'll get, then I'll pour the coffee, I'll get myself ready. So I do a lot of like adult practical life tasks.
It's the same kind of thing.
Yes, and I bet that, and I know that thinking back in my life at various jobs, it's been that way for many, many, many years for me. You wake up, you take a shower, you clean your body, shave, whatever it is. That was my routine.
And Maria Montessori's children would also clean themselves.
They'd come in, they'd wash their hands with the basin, they'd prepare themselves. So this calm start to the day it's both good as a Montessori and it's also good as a model for life.
Right.
These are creating healthy adults, future adults, right? When we give them these kinds of skills. So a Montessori, so the number one, or not number one is in importance, but the first thing on our list of what that Montessori rhythm might have in it is a calm start.
Right.
Not jumping up and saying, now it's time to crack the books and we're going to read about addition problems. It's get up, let's do some practical life, let's get our morning started.
I liked your idea of percolation. Maybe we'll just call it the percolation period. How does that sound?
Percolation. We have a couple.
Rick
Von Suzuki String says it's always changing. I think
that's Annie.
Oh, Annie, hi. And it's in, I think, in regard to the hat. We tried to work around we try to work around out of the house commitments and observe when my children are most regulated and ready to work. So in terms of like the rhythm that they follow. And then Heather says a sun visor. If this would be your hat, that's a good one. I am just starting with my 1-year-old boy. I love all your advice, wisdom. Thank you both. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Sweetness. Okay, we've already mentioned the work cycle as we talked about that calm start, because guess what? That calm start is actually part of the work cycle.
That's true. But this would be the second of the, like, okay, now I've got my hat on.
Yep.
I've got a good calm start. The child is kind of getting the brain woken up, and now they're moving into, or hopefully we're creating the environment for the work cycle. What is the work cycle for those friends who are newer to Montessori?
Yeah, okay, the work cycle is, if you think about the way you engage with something that you work on or concentrate on, it's the same for your child. You probably start with, maybe they always say, like, start with an easier task first, get those done. I know a lot of people do those with, like, I'm not going to get into, they say, I'm not going to answer all the emails first because it takes a lot of brain work. I'm going to take on an easy little task first. And so I know that's very common in an office environment, rhythm too. And it's a great way to think about that work cycle. Maria Montessori noticed that children eased into their work, and that if we persisted with them, giving them space to make choices, to become interested, if we had prepared an environment that was just rich and full of interesting things, that the children would be called to the kind of work that would really benefit their growth and development and their intellectual growth as well at the time. It doesn't mean that we're not involved during the work cycle, but this would be a period where children are drawn into some deep work, and then after they've finished that deep work, they kind of transition out and need a period of rest. And so just like any other kind of seasonal cycle or the cycle of the days, you begin, sun rises, you get to the middle of the day and you're really in your work period, and then you have the period where you're starting to relax and get ready for sleep, right? So it's the same with the work cycle. And Maria Montessori felt like children's natural work cycles were so important that we should, as guides, make space and time to protect them. And so she created, kind of arbitrarily, based on her documentation, but kind of arbitrarily too, that any teacher who is to be trained as a Montessori guide must solemnly swear the Montessori oath that they would protect the 3-hour work cycle. Yes. And this does not mean that your children are working and concentrating for 3 whole hours.
Yes.
It is your commitment to provide at least 3 hours of their day to uninterrupted time for your child to be curious and explore and deepen their understanding of the world. And obviously, this is going to look different for everyone.
And by age. So level of development, where they are in terms of readiness, where they are in the planes of development. But so I think this is a confusing one for folks too, because it kind of can sound like, oh, well, no, I got it. So you have a relaxing breakfast and then you crack open the books.
Right.
And that's not exactly what we're suggesting. Right. The work cycle, and if you take the Foundations of Primary course with us, we'll teach you I don't think we have an example of it
the learning
in
journal here, and I have our observation handouts.
Yeah, so there is but the actuality is that with the work cycle, it's actually a pattern, and it can be visualized. I don't think we have a visual in our documentation here, but it's kind of like a rising, and then down. And what you're really looking for is quiet. When your child is so absorbed into it that they seem to be doing nothing, except for maybe nothing. It looks like they're doing nothing, in fact. That can actually be when they are most engaged. And that's why protecting the 3-hour period is so important, because what you're looking to do is give them time to become completely engrossed in the activity, and then allow that natural rhythm, which she was observed over many, many years, watching all the children progress, and was able to document how a child goes into this period of learning, this work cycle, and what it looks like, and then what it looks like when they come out. You can learn to recognize those signs too. And unlike what you might expect, it doesn't necessarily look like a child filling out a worksheet or moving from one class to the next or picking the next book out of the basket that they have to work through for that day. in a Montessori approach, what you're really looking for is giving the child access to the materials that you've helped curate, and then you're looking to spark that absorbent mind and see what they're drawn to, and then giving them time to really get fixated on it in a deep, meaningful way.
Yeah. Obviously, that won't happen every single day for every single child or in the same way.
Nope.
Remember that it is your commitment to find unstructured time where your child can deepen their concentration and work to their heart's content, and you're just going to protect this. You're going to create a little bubble of time around them. And what are you doing during this period? You're not just sitting there. You're giving lessons. You're making lunch. You're going, maybe you're reading stories to the little one. You're going about your day. So often I think parents get worried that they have to be doing something or teaching during the whole 3 hours, or if their child isn't concentrating for the whole 3 hours, it's a problem.
Yeah, it's like from 9 to 12, it's the 3-hour work. That's not that's not how it works.
I know, but I will say this, that if you feel like your homeschool rhythm isn't working, one of the things that you might be missing is that that 2 or 3 hour work cycle to protect. And so what that looked like for me when our kids were little was, I told you 9 o'clock already, right? Like we woke up early. At one point, our toddler was waking up with a sunrise. So we had a lot of time to percolate before our older child woke up. But once he was up, we probably had about an hour to breakfast and filter into our day. But when the clock did say 9 o'clock, that was my cue to be thinking, like this is the time that I have set aside to follow the children and to make sure that I am protecting a work cycle and not bombarding every single day with a litany of things to do.
Yeah.
I know that can feel easy to do as a homeschooler. It can be really uncomfortable to sit at home with ourselves while our children are playing, and we can also feel that sense of imposter syndrome, like
Sure.
I'm not teaching my kid at every minute, or my child just wants to sit and play with their train set or their stuffies. I did a reel on Instagram about this with the train set the other day.
Yeah.
Like awareness, like if your child is learning and engaged with their toys, this is still part of that work cycle. They are if they're concentrating and finding joy in it, there's no reason to interrupt them from it.
Yeah.
But after he was done playing with his train set, it meant that maybe while he was playing, I was kind of doing some planning and thinking about what Montessori lessons I might want to give next. And when he wrapped up that period of concentration with that particular activity, I was ready with the next interesting thing to present.
Yep.
And so if you lean into this idea of like, I am going to protect the hours between 9 and 11, 3 days a week or every single day of the week or whatever it is that you can hold yourself to. Maybe it's between 1 and 3 p.m. or, maybe it's 11 to...
It's whatever works for your family.
11 to 1, or 11 to 3, whatever it is for you. And it can vary as, you go through different seasons of life. That is a commitment that will help you to get closer to that ideal Montessori rhythm.
Yeah, and remember, not every 3-hour period, every day is going to be a good one. Sometimes it's going to be chaotic.
Yeah.
But also remember, this is another great example of where this is the happy medium, right? So, yes, you do want a work time. You do want a time where you are blocking out. No, you don't necessarily want that block time, especially with the very youngest, to be, okay, now we're going to work through this folder and this folder and this folder and this folder, right? Yeah. That will march them through content, but it does not necessarily ensure that they're actually learning, engaged, developing a passion. Yeah. Remember that when they get into about the age of 10 to 12, their brain starts to do this weeding process where they actively begin to forget things.
Yep, they will literally forget most of what you
So
taught
as they are exiting the second plane, a lot of the stuff, they could be fantastically aware of all the facts that you taught them or that they learned about dinosaurs at the age of 7. They may remember none of that by the age of 12 because that's how the human brain works.
Right, but what you are teaching them is critical thinking.
That's right. You're teaching them critical thinking. You're teaching them to value the learning process. You're teaching them how to kind of set themselves up for success. those are the lessons that will persist.
That's right.
Okay, Overthinking It has a great question. She has,
Yeah.
what age does that 3-hour cycle go
This
through?
is such a good question because I wanted to touch on Heather's 1-year-old as well.
Oh, yes.
We can expect little toddlers' work cycles, their natural biological work cycle, not just the bubble that you create artificially to protect it. But a young toddler's work cycle is going to be super, super short. And it's very, very hard to witness. It is there. I promise you it's there. But it's going to be very, very brief.
Yes.
Toddlers are like little butterflies. They're going to fly over here, touch something, fly over here, bump into something over here, get immersed in this. They're constantly distracted. And this is all for an important developmental reason. Their primary purpose is to take in all the sensory input then they can cram into their little brains. And this is going to be auditory information and tactile information. And so they're
Taste, smell.
They're constantly seeking it. And so, yes, they're going to have little work cycles. They're going to be very, very short. And in a toddler classroom, we usually say if you have like a 2-year-old who is in their deep concentration period, it's probably going to be more like 30 minutes. For the whole work cycle rather than, or an hour and a half for like a 2.5 to 3-year-old, at max before their brains are exhausted. They need that period of rest again.
So that 3-hour period that you protected might be filled with a lot of snuggles.
Yeah. Stories and snuggles, or maybe you go outside and your child has a little work cycle outside and then you come back in, they have a little snack, and then maybe they even have a little work cycle while they're helping to prepare their snack and they get engaged in
doing some practical life.
Doing some practical life.
Get that wavy chopper out depending on their age.
But I think the important thing to remember is that concentration develops over time with enough space. So a lot of people get tripped up around the ages of 3 and 4 when they start doing Montessori for real, right? And they're like, oh, we're really doing the work cycle. And they realize their 3 and 4-year-old still doesn't have the attention span that they were hoping for in the concept of a 3-hour work cycle.
Yeah.
But that's because, the whole first plane of development is not from 0 to 3 or 4, it's from 0 to 6. And so Maria Montessori created the whole primary curriculum based on that age span. So our ideal, and I can tell you it's true of most children, that by the time they get to be about first grade, if they have been given the opportunity to lengthen their concentration through practical experiences and choice in things that they're interested in repeating, then you will see that concentration develop. It's going to look different from kid to kid. A kid who has, kids come in all types of attention spans. I think we're more aware of this now than ever,
yes,
right?
For sure.
which is great and natural and normal. So if your child naturally has a longer attention span, they might get to that longer period of concentration faster. If your child naturally has a shorter attention span, it might always be a little bit shorter than the average, but that doesn't have anything to do with the Montessori approach. The Montessori's approach the same. All children will develop longer concentration by around ages 6 to 7.
Yeah, so this is, we talk about this as the journey to abstraction. So your primary age child is 0 to 6. We generally focus on like ages 3 to 6, which is the second half of that plane.
In the Montessori
In the Montessori community. This is an age of sensorial learning. They're very hyper focused on absorbing as much as they can.
Yeah.
You see that with a baby sticking everything into its mouth, right? It's wanting to feel and taste the sensation, and it continues on. And then when they get, as Aubrey's saying, to about the age of 6 or 7, they start going into the second plane. And that is the journey to abstraction, when they begin to perceive things intellectually, not just tangibly. And it is a life-changing experience for them.
Yeah.
And it's part of that is accompanied by this kind of concentration and a focus on big questions, like how did I get here? What happened to the dinosaurs? Why is the sky blue? Could you ever jump so high that you could touch a cloud? Like all those kinds of crazy kid questions. Or like what is right and wrong, and what happens when you die? All the kinds of things that kids that start to ask because their brains are suddenly exploding with this ability to think deeply and concentrate.
Yeah.
Now, overthinking it asks, I think part of the question she asked is, when does that 3-hour cycle end? Is there ever a point at which a child is no longer needing to protect a 3-hour cycle? And I don't know that there's any.
Well,
Did Maria ever write?
no.
I don't think so, right?
No, she never ended it. But she did notice that even though elementary children have moved into that second plane of development and their brains are more accessible to abstraction, she also noted that they're more open to social learning rather than individual learning. And so that 3-hour work cycle does look different the older you get. So when your children move into that second plane, into those elementary years, you might see a sudden surge of interest in social communication and wanting to work with a peer, And by the time they reach age 10, which is still part of that second plane, that's the age of the best friend, where your child might want to find a best friend and just be with their best friend all the time and work together,
Well, this is what leads to the weeding out of the academics, because
Right?
the brain becomes, as you get in closer to that third plane, the brain becomes super focused on building human relations.
Yes, and then you all probably remember your own adolescence, right? All 12-year-olds want to do is just hang out with each other and then gossip.
Or think about it, or worry why
about
they're
each
not.
other, and right, friend issues become the big point, and academics take
They feel like they've taken a back seat, right?
They do. And it's on purpose. And Maria Montessori had a plan for this too. Her developmental plan, if you are new to Montessori, I'll just tell you, she actually thought that school, the academic part of school, should end at age 12. At the end of the second plane, she said, children no longer have the brains to just be totally immersed in academics.
Absorbing.
They are now immersed in practical life again, and what they crave is real hard work. We're talking about back-breaking labor. They crave it. That's why our teenagers often want to lift those weights or push those heavy things. Our teen boys especially, we're really into take them to
run real fast, throw that ball as far as they can.
You can think of it in terms of I'm thinking about teen boys wanting to tackle each other and roughhouse on, even older kids, right? Something physical. Part of that is the rush of testosterone, but the other part is just the brain is not thinking about math and science or literature anymore. The brain's thinking about other things. And for girls, you might see groups where you see groups of, I'm kind of getting gender specific here, but based on science and observation, generally we see groups of girls kind of gathering together and wanting to chat and text and talk all the time, and there's a lot of drama that goes on as they try and figure out each other's motivations and emotions, and boys do that too as well, but
just expressed in different ways, but it's still the same thing.
It's the same thing.
They're really, when we are humans at this age, when we are teens, it is hard because all we're thinking about is our cohesion into society.
Right.
And so I know this is too far afield of where most of our parents are, but even if you have a 1-year-old, someday that 1-year-old will be 17 and wanting to figure out the world and what is justice, and I should go vote, or I'm going to change the world, I'm going to clean up this dump, whatever it is. That's the age that it happens, and it's an outgrowth of this sense of we're a part of this community and I want to take control. Yeah. So to go back to the 3-hour period, I'm going to say, I don't have any evidence for this. I'm going to say that it doesn't necessarily end. Mm-hmm. I suspect that even in adulthood, if reflecting on my own self or reflecting on people I've worked with, we still kind of go through these periods where we finally get into something, we can concentrate for a while, and then we kind of get fatigued. And we step out of that, and that's something like a work cycle.
But
even
also,
in the
if
adult
we're
years.
Interrupted during our own work, adults will get angry.
Oh, sure.
If you're trying to concentrate on something, or if your job requires a lot of multitasking. There's an abundance of evidence that says that our human brains really aren't wired to do so much multitasking these days.
Yeah,
And if
yeah.
you want to get some real work done, turn your notifications off and put your phone away and put yourself in a quiet space and where you'll be allowed to
And an older child,
not be interrupted.
and an older child, a teen, and an adult knows. So that's a key difference as well.
Yeah.
So maybe it doesn't necessarily end, but what has changed is the conscious awareness. So I remember, for example, being in college, like I would take myself to the library for hours and hours and
That's
hours
right.
to get work done because it was quiet, nobody could bother me. I could go hide away somewhere and just like plow through my work.
Right.
And that was like that was a development of recognizing I had a work cycle and I needed to protect it. When you guys are your little guys, you're going to protect it for them.
That's right.
All right. So
right.
that's a calm start. A work cycle. Now,
Work
number
cycle.
3 in our
And
hat.
Just to tell anyone who has not yet taken the primary course, we talk a lot about the work cycle.
Yeah, that's right.
Do all this kind of observation and help you to understand that concept more deeply as you apply the Montessori method.
Okay, I've got my hat on again. What's
Okay.
the third thing?
Okay, I think the third point is to not overlook the importance of movement and of nourishment. You know, children, whether you take the approach of like your children grazing all day or whether you have 3 concrete meals, either way, taking that time, they say that human beings were really wired to take in their nourishment in a social context and movement as well, I think. Just if we think back to the ways of being, in terms of our own human evolution, like those were both experiences that humans shared together. And so taking time during your work cycle or before, after, and during for both to eat together and socially just like relax and chat with each other while you're preparing food or eating, that's really, really important. And our own kids really loved it.
Yes.
I can't tell you, friends, how many other parents of teenagers that I have meeting now, that I have teens, who say to me that their kids can't cook, or they ask me like, oh, do your kids ever cook anything? And I'm like, our kids can cook full course meals anytime they want because it was a part of our homeschool. And it was an important, we could even call it like anchoring moments, the cooking of the preparation and the cooking together, the being conscious of the ingredients that we're pulling together to be part of a meal. It's not that we never have fast meals or that we never go out to eat.
No, of course.
But this is an important part of our homeschool day that really helped us to feel bonded and centered.
Yeah, so preparing a meal, and not just for yourself, but for others. Learning grace and courtesy.
Not everybody has the energy or the spoons, they might say, to be able to fully prepare a meal from scratch. Whatever you're preparing with your child, whether it's pre-made or not, like taking that moment to breathe together and to eat together, even if you're not talking, like it's still really important.
Yeah, food is such a significant part of our culture, right? It's just, it's just foundational, right?
Yeah.
And so this idea of nourishment, and then of course movement could be in the kitchen, it could be doing chores. Like I was thinking of something else that we really push the boys to understand is like doing your own laundry, taking care of yourself. Something that sometimes parents of teens are like, I can't get my kid to wash his clothes.
Yeah, and we also have never paid our kids to do chores, and we don't really even call them chores. It's just like, these are some things
They're
that
responsibilities.
need to be done.
Yeah, you don't get rewarded for doing responsibilities. So
and also
the reward
we
is
have found,
that you
to our
did
surprise, our kids really like doing them too.
Yeah.
Not everybody
to whatever
loves,
degree you can like.
Not everybody
folding
loves
laundry.
taking out the trash all the time, right? But it does give a sense of independence and empowerment and responsibility,
community.
Yeah, contributing to community. So that's also.
So this would be a third component of a good Montessori rhythm. Now, again, I keep thinking about how these points are very familiar to people who might follow a more traditional approach. I bet, no doubt, you have lunchtime.
Right.
Like you have built into your schedule. Lunchtime, you might have built in
maybe go to the
PE
playground,
time or exercise time, right? If you're in a school, or even if you're homeschooling in a more following a more traditional flow, it's the same thing. What we're really saying is that the hat is doing the heavy lifting. You're seeing this activity from a different child-led perspective.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So we've got that calm start. We understand that there's going to be a protected bubble of work cycle in your day. You're making a point to anchor yourself in nourishment and in movement activities throughout your day. And let's talk about that anchoring inside your day.
This is number 4,
okay? Because I've used that word a few times. This is where your goal setting is so important. If you enter into your homeschool with no clue of what kind of outcome you want out of this experience, then it's going to be really hard to find yourself, at any kind of finish line.
That's
all right?
right.
And that can make us feel unempowered. It can make us feel like imposters. It can make us feel depressed or despondent, or like we're just not hacking it.
Yeah, or you're
right?
not doing you're not fulfilling your responsibility as
Right.
a homeschooler or as a mom or dad.
So
There's so much guilt that comes with it.
we do a lot of this kind of goal setting in our community. We do planning sessions every 3 months, and I think it really helps for parents to have a time period where they're consciously thinking about what the next 3 months is going to look like, not just tomorrow, but that kind of future planning. And then also deciding like what outcomes are important to me,
That's right.
And if you choose something, and it doesn't mean like my child is going to read by the end of this age or whatever, like that's kind of putting your goal on them. But if your outcome is a little bit fuzzier, like our goal is for our children to embrace their creativity, and that's like our focus this year, then you'll be able to look at the events in your daily schedule and see like, what is it that we're doing as part of our day that is edging towards that embracing the creative spirit. And
Yeah.
so an example of that might be that you might anchor yourself in a creative activity every single day. It could be like every day in the afternoon, I'm going to get out our art box and I'm going to do some modeling. We're going to get out the tape and the glue and the scissors, and we're going to cut and paste. Even if we don't create anything great, we're going to make that creative activity part of our every day, or like twice a week, or whatever it is that you decide for you. For us, one of our anchors was that we wanted to be a family with children who had a deep love of literature. David and I both love literature. We have English majory backgrounds and met at a grammar center in our university of all places to fall in love. We fell in love teaching English together. I know. So it's important to our family. It's something that we love, that we want to share with our kids. We wanted to raise our children with a love of literature and the arts. And so we were very intentional about anchoring ourselves both to regularly visiting art museums with our kids from a very young age together as a family. And we were really intentional about reading together.
Yeah, and for us, that looked like reading aloud much longer than you might assume, right?
Much longer and for more parts of the day.
Yeah, and so even when the boys were coming into their early teens, we still did read aloud.
Yep.
Because it was a good way to all be together.
Yeah.
Now, eventually, we got to a point where they would have their own copies of the book, and maybe we would share around the reading.
It looked different during different ages.
And it'll look different for what it is in your family, whatever your anchor is. But yeah, literature and exposure to really high quality writing and literature, and learning how to do literary analysis was an important part of it for us.
So if you kind of start there with like, what is core that you really, really value about this educational experience, this unique and beautiful time period of your life where you're offering your children this gift of homeschooling, of Montessori, what is it that's going to be your real focus? And this will help your rhythm to feel a lot more pleasantly structured, right?
Yes, and I think it's also, again, I go back to the kind of the classic example with homeschooling where you have the crate or the box or whatever, and it's filled with folders, and you're going to work your way through the folders. Like I'm starting in the morning, I start with the red one and I end at the green one. I mean, it is a way to be organized, and if it works for you and your family, I'm glad for it. But
yeah, I love folders and organization.
that's not necessarily the only way, or even perhaps the best way to anchor your day. Like anchoring your day around progressing through the folders is not necessarily what is going to speak to your child or teach them lasting skills.
Yeah.
It puts a goal on a very extrinsic kind of thing. At the same time, again, because we're talking about a sweet spot, it's not to say you don't follow any curriculum. Like the Montessori curriculum is very robust. It's very orderly.
Yep.
There are things that you'll work on at ages 2 and 3 and 4. You will learn to read. You will learn to do complex math.
So
In
many
fact,
lessons to get.
the Montessori method probably will teach, I think generally teaches reading, math, and those and the humanities better than traditional curriculum. I think studies have found that a child, let's say in a lower L, is already working on geometry. They're doing advanced grammar if they want. They're learning a very complex science by the age of 9, and that's not things that are not traditionally taught at that age. So it's a very robust, very academically rich curriculum. But again, it's the hat. The hat's doing a lot of work. We're putting on the hat and we're saying it's not, I want to get through folders A through B or A through D. It's, I want to give my child a sense of love of where we're working on dandelions right now. Right?
Yeah.
I want my child to I want to explore flowers and flowers with my child. And that's my kind of goal for now. That's my anchor.
Yep.
And I want to go out and pick flowers, and I want to dissect flowers, and I want to learn the names of the parts of flowers depending on the age, and I want to read poems about flowers, and I want to draw pictures of flowers, or do all these kinds of different things. And that can be a way to kind of anchor your day around a study area.
Yeah.
And that's a way to kind of tie it in. Other kinds of anchors are the ones that Aubrey talked about.
Yes, no, you're absolutely right. What we do in Constellation, this month's theme is dandelion.
Yeah, that's what was in my mind.
Right. I mean, these are anchors that are provided to you and that you can, well, I think a lot of our parents do find useful.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I would love to hear your experiences out there of the kind of anchors that are working for you in your homeschool. If you're joining us and you're already homeschooling with Montessori, or if you're a member, I know some of us are members out there in there. But I would love to hear more about like what kind of anchors you are finding useful, because we could go on and on during different periods of our homeschooling. These anchors, the anchors changed from year to year.
Totally.
Sometimes it was the dance party every single day that I held myself to, or that we held ourselves to as a family. As the kids got older, we've kind of transitioned to more into like, we work out together with weights. It's like an anchor as part of our homeschool day together with the kids. And nature, like going out in nature. Park day was on Tuesdays for years for us. And no matter, and I'm a total introvert and super shy in social situations, but I made myself go and I made our kids go because I felt like being among other homeschoolers was such an important anchor for us that we made time for it in our schedule. So everyone, because we work with a global community, not everyone has the same resources or interests or inclinations.
Nope.
And so finding a Montessori homeschool rhythm that works for you is a process that you go through while you're teaching your children, not something that you embrace from the beginning and just do it perfectly forever the first time.
Totally.
Like you kind of work your anchors in and find what really resonates with you and your family. All right, finally.
Yeah, well, we're seeing if anybody has any thoughts on that. So what's our fifth?
Okay, our fifth one is to close up your day, with that calm ending to your day, just like you started it. So you start with a calm start. How are you going to close up your day? And it could be, if you're the kind of homeschooler who wants to have a clear beginning and end to the homeschool time, we never did. We just closed up our day. But we did it very ritualistically every single night. We had a very clear bedtime routine. Yes. We were not the kind of parents who just sent their kids off to bed and expected them to go fall asleep on their own and do their own thing. I'm
not sure that they would have anyway.
We didn't end up with those kind of kids. I know kids that will do that, but that wasn't ours. But wrapping up with like a family dinner, we would personally, our closure was you would come home from the office when our kids were little.
Yep.
And the kids and I, had hopefully like gotten ourselves together enough so that we prepared some kind of dinner and we could sit down together. The kids were really involved with setting the tables. They loved to light the candles, and we did it every time we could manage it, we did it in a very elaborate way. And I don't know, I just found this fun.
Yep.
And the kids found it fun too. So out would come the tablecloth, and one kid would set the table with plates, and the other would cart things from the kitchen to the table. And we did it like formal family dinner style, and kind of like that way you might envision the 1930s family, right, sitting around the rustic table together, all laid out. And our kids loved it. They loved it. And we even had a little pitcher of water, not because everybody couldn't go and get their own drink from the kitchen, but because it gave the kids an opportunity to serve themselves.
I mean, it's a
and
Montessori
each other, right?
lesson.
And they learned how to light candles really
Montessori
early.
lesson.
Another
Yeah.
Montessori lesson, and to tamp. I bought a little tamper so that they like can tamp them out and snuff a snuffer.
Now let's keep it real. This was not the super
Not at age 1.
formal.
Yeah.
I was going to say
I was gonna say.
it was not fancy, but it was a
fancy
ritual.
for us.
Yes,
it was fancy for us.
It was
fancy, and we also called them the 3-minute dinners, because
Yes.
most of it would be about the preparation of the table and getting the kids to help.
Gotta go.
And then the kids, of course, can't sit through a long dinner. And so David and I would sit down, we would light the candle, and the kids would be like, well, I ate a bunch of snacks today and I'm not really hungry for dinner. So they might eat a couple bites and then they would be done. And we were never the kind of parents that made our kids sit at the table until everyone was finished. We just let them go play. But it was when they were little. Yeah. But it was, and our kids actually really enjoy the family dinner. And when we don't do it these days, they miss it and complain.
And we do make them wait until everybody's done eating this time.
Wait. Yeah, now as our
they're older and they're ready for
as the
social
kids
grace.
get older, their concentration does get older,
and the social
abilities.
graces change.
Yes.
But it's a great, you're describing an anchor, right?
Yes.
Like that was an anchor in our life.
It was.
And it was a time to reconnect, because I had been out of the office. Sometimes in prior career lives, I traveled overseas. I was gone for quite a long time for stretches. And those dinners and having that ritual was really important when we were back together. And then after that, it was be jammies, and we always did story time at night, and I would read or I would make up a story. And I tried to do that. That was a part of our anchor too, is because I didn't get to spend as much time with the boys. I really tried to do as much as I could in the evening to have that connection.
That's right.
That was the rhythm of our family. Everyone's rhythm will be a little different, but for us, that was an anchor, and it was a connection and a closure. And laying with the boys, reading them a story, letting them go to sleep, and then moving on and getting up and doing it all over again.
Yeah, sometimes those bedtime often came with a lot of reflection as well, reminding our children about the accomplishments that they had made throughout the day,
what they did,
the things that they had been learning and putting their energy into, and kind of seeding, what might happen tomorrow. And we did that intentionally as well. We would talk to them if they couldn't come up with it on their own. Sometimes they couldn't. Like, if you ask a kid, like, tell me what you did today, they're probably going to say, I don't know, right? But if you remember some of the things that they did that day, we would intentionally say, wow, today was
sure did a lot.
Such a sunny day. We went to the park, and I saw you with some sand. And our kid would say, yeah, I played with so-and-so and moved the sand. And that would just be an opportunity to have that little touch space of like, yeah, we did a lot. Or even if it was stuff that I had done, I would say, wow, I did a whole lot today. I remember giving you that lesson with that science experiment, and we learned about blah, blah, blah. So you telling your child back some of the things that you observed or noticed can be a really empowering feeling for them. And then you seed it for what they're going to do tomorrow.
Yeah, so that's the connection and a bit of closure,
and then
right?
you say, I wonder what you'll choose to do tomorrow. I wonder if you'll want to research more of that or not. And you're not saying, tomorrow we're going to give a lesson on this. Right. You're saying, I wonder where your heart will lead you. I wonder what you will be interested in. I wonder if you will also enjoy doing that again, kind of letting them drift off with that, I think, kind of closure feeling of like, I've accomplished, I don't need to worry about anything that happened. We're all like, we've made peace with everything that went on. If you need to say it, have a last minute apology of something that you did, it's also a good time to do it. And then you kind of make your wish for the next day. And it's just such a beautiful closure. And you don't have to do it at bedtime. If your bedtime ritual isn't like ours, then maybe you do it during dinner, or maybe you do it before dinner or during bath or whatever.
Yeah.
But closing up the day's learning activities and seeding tomorrow is it's just a great strategy that I think we just don't really talk about a lot, but we definitely did.
Yeah, so I'm putting my hat back on for one final review. What does my Montessori rhythm look like with my fun sun visor? Or what did you have, a purple sparkly hat?
You
or...
have a Giants cap on.
Sure, of
Heather's
course.
got the visor. I have, yes, I have my garden hat on.
And your day is going to look familiar if you're comparing it to what the traditional sort of Instagram or imagination kind of a storybook version of schooling looks like. But you've got that Montessori rhythm hat on, and so you're going to know that it's actually a little bit different. You're going to have a calm start. You're going to protect work time. Mm-hmm. You're going to build in time for nourishment and movement in a communal way as possible. Mm-hmm. You're going to have anchors throughout the day, and those anchors could be bedtime ritual. It could be something that you're studying or interested in.
It could be art.
It could be art. Nature. It could be a spiritual practice. Mm-hmm. And you're going to have connection and closure that's going to help kind of draw things down and maybe plant the seed of excitement for the day ahead. And that's how you kind of wear that little Montessori hat. Now,
that's right.
There's a lot more that you can do and learn. And if you'd like to know more about it, you can join us at Child of the Redwoods. We have programs that focus on helping you find your new favorite anchor. This month we're doing Dandelion with all of our friends out there. Mm-hmm. You also will learn how to teach Montessori at home for both primary and lower elementary. Mm-hmm. You'll get observation handouts and other things and learn how to use them so that you can know exactly what you're seeing and how to sort of plan it out. You can learn how to plan out to help your kids walk through that beautiful Montessori curriculum from ages 2 to 9, right. Without having to focus on sort of the very kind of strict and less child-focused approach that we sometimes see, because actually you can get them through amazing academics and let it be child-centered if you learn the technique.
Yes, and I think the most wonderful part of our curriculum is that you are never held to a very specific lesson that you're supposed to be giving this week, right?
Yes.
It's not that structured, but you will never be at a loss for ideas of what to teach.
No.
There's so many beautiful Montessori lessons that you can give that will inspire your child to be curious about the world, that they will want to repeat, that you'll give them and think maybe they didn't get it, but then surprisingly a few days later it comes back. Yes, and they did learn a whole lot about the concept, and it's just such a beautiful journey that we've had the privilege to witness with parents on a global level. So if you're interested in that, please go visit us at childoftheredwoods.com and learn how it works.
Yep. Heather has a comment. She says, our small farm is one of our biggest anchors. We have to check on the flock 3 times a day when Dad is gone.
Aww.
That's great. Yeah, that's a great way.
That is a great example of an anchor.
It sure is. All right. I know we are out of time, but it was a special weekend.
It was.
What was this weekend?
Mother's Day?
That's right. It was. Well, we don't actually call it Mother's Day.
Oh, you don't?
No. We have a different name for it.
Oh. Well, what is it? What is a Mother Bunny?
It's Dough Day.
It's Dough Day.
Yeah.
Oh.
Dough Day.
Dough Day.
Yeah. Oh. It's especially popular with daughters.
With daughters.
And sons. Did you celebrate Mother's Day or Dough Day?
I did. I celebrated Dough Day.
Oh, yes. What did you do?
I spent time with my family.
Ooh, that sounds good. I also spent time with my family.
Oh, good.
Of course, my mommy, but
Yes.
also all my brothers, sisters, and cousins. You'll never guess how many there are.
Oh, I can imagine there might be a lot
Yes,
of a family of rabbits.
that's right. There are so many, I can't even count them on both hands,
Oh.
which is unfortunate because I don't even have fingers. Yikes.
You've got the cutest little paws,
Oh, boy.
though.
Well, thank you for coming by, Mr. Bunny. Oh, thank you. And I hope that all the mothers out there had a great one. And we will see you next week with another Power Hour.
Take care, everyone.